Hi, everyone. Welcome to the UPE Alumni Podcast. Today, we'll be talking about quantitative trading, known as quant, and financial technology, which is known as fintech. I'm Jessica. I'm a fourth-year computer science major at UCLA, and I am also the UPE Advocacy Director, and I will be moderating today. So to briefly introduce everybody, Alden is currently a cybersecurity engineer at Jane Street Capital, where he works on building and maintaining systems supporting traders. He graduated from UCLA in spring 2020 after previously interning at Jane Street and at companies such as Google and Facebook. Lucas is a third-year computer science major and the UPE social officer. This past summer, he interned at Citadel as a software engineering intern. Nikki is a fourth-year computer science and engineering major, currently serving as the tutoring chair for UPE. This past summer, she interned at 2 Sigma as a software engineering intern, working under the data quality team. And in the past, she has interned at AT&T. Ray is an incoming algorithm engineer at Hudson River Trading, a high-frequency quantitative trading firm based in New York. Ray's previous experience in finance includes interning as a software engineer at Citadel Securities and Bloomberg. He graduated from UCLA in 2019 with a degree in computer science and worked at Airbnb for 1 year. In his free time, he likes to write about math and CS on his blog, work out, and explore hole-in-the-wall restaurants pre-COVID. And so to roadmap our discussion today, the format is sort of like an open discussion with guided questions. 3 areas we want to talk about today is an introduction to quant and fintech, getting into the field, and the career progression. So to kick off with our first part, introduction to quant and fintech, the first question I have is what exactly do you do and how is it different from conventional software engineering?
So I can start. Basically, I think there's actually quite a bit of overlap when it comes to software engineering for like a financial institution and like your typical like Big Four company. You're typically dealing with a very large scale of data, and there's usually more emphasis on like the back end type roles in the financial institutions as opposed to front end type roles, because we don't necessarily have a customer that's like a typical customer that you would think of when you're thinking about like the Big Four. And so we typically deal with problems like data ingestion on a very large scale, machine learning applications, and like research tooling frameworks, and some low level like hardware related things.
Yeah, I think that there can be a very broad space that fintech can cover. That when you have a financial company, you need all the moving parts that you'd have in a Big Four, at least on the back end. As Ray said, you don't have as much that's directly presenting to users, but you still have to have some core services team that handles that, like handling Linux, handling your workspaces that traders might work in. You need a team that's making sure that everyone's staying safe. So for example, cybersecurity, working on tools that traders might use or even other coders, and automating normal tasks that you might have day to day. So it's a lot of those similar tasks you might find at, say, a Big Four or a startup that's more client facing, but it's focused towards financials or trading or something.
Yeah, I think I was pretty surprised like after this past summer interning with Citadel, because like I wasn't exactly sure what exactly to expect. But I think most internship projects were, building some like system or tool for like traders or like researchers. And I think in that sense, it's sort of like similar to like software engineering internships like elsewhere. You're also going to be, potentially working on some system.
And yeah, just to add on to that, I think that as a software engineering intern, I didn't feel like there was a very stark difference between working in fintech versus working in typical tech companies. I would say that a lot of the engineers that I interacted with didn't necessarily have a lot of knowledge about, how finances work, like stocks, dividends, stuff like that. And I certainly didn't really need to have any in-depth knowledge to work on my project. So I'd say that in creating the tools to help execute trades, you don't necessarily need to be well-versed in finance in order to do your job. You just need to be a good software engineer.
Yeah, like I don't know. Oh, sorry. I don't know whether Lucas or Ray knows a lot about financials, but I personally am like you, Nikki. I know very little about actual financial stuff or what the product that our company does is. I just know that, like I know my little realm that I can build and support people with.
Yeah, when I was interning at Citadel, I didn't really understand like what particularly like stuff they were working on when it comes to like financial instruments. And this time around, like I'm coming in with like minimal knowledge as well. They gave me this like humongous book that I have to read, so then I can understand some stuff. But even then, I think they don't expect you to go in having read the entire book. So.
Would you say you're the same, Lucas?
Yeah, like I don't think I learned like that much like financial related stuff, like just like the basic knowledge required um on the specific team I was working on, which was the ETF team.
One thing, so not from my personal experience, but from experience of some of my friends who have done work more directly with traders, that they did have to take, there's an SEC test that you do have to learn rules and regulations for and pass so that you can be certified. So if you end up going a lot closer to the actual trading aspect, you will likely have to go through something of that sort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard about that too. I think like also it's not technically like how financial instruments work, but rather like the infrastructure that makes it work in not only your company, but also like how exchanges like deliver that information to you. That's fairly important for a software engineer. But I think that can be abstracted into like just dealing with data that's coming at you at like a really fast rate.
Okay, so the next question is, what does the day-to-day workflow in your position look like?
Okay, I can start. So, I mean, I can only speak for when I was interning at Citadel, because I'm just starting to work at HRT. I can't really say for sure like what is gonna be my typical day, but basically, you have to be there when the market opens, and the market opens at 9 a.m. That was back when, but this is like obviously subject to the manager that you're under. But I think a typical day is kind of like a typical day in a software engineer's life, because you have like Slack, you have like your communication tools, you have your daily team stand up, you communicate with other software engineers, occasionally with some quantitative researchers and developers who need to ask you particular questions about the tools that you're building, and you track your like issues and stuff on, for example, Jira, like everyone else.
Yeah, I guess I can add. So so my team, I was on the data quality team at 2 Sigma. I wasn't directly working with live trading. So since I was mostly dealing with data quality, I didn't necessarily need to be up at 9:30 Eastern time, which is pretty nice. And I think, like Ray said, it's team dependent. Like if your team works primarily with live trading, then you will need to be up by then. But other than that, I think it was very typical of a software engineer in a tech company. So I had meetings with my managers, and then I had time to work on my projects, and then more meetings. And yeah.
Yeah, also like the number of hours that you work, um, it's like not necessarily some obscene amount. Like for internship, obviously, like you're not going to be working like 12 hours a day. But I think even for like full time, it's not, you're not necessarily going to be spending like 60 hours a week as well. I think it's very dependent on like how passionate you are about like a certain, you know, maybe you really want to finish some like goal in your project. Then you might put in extra hours. Um, I'm not exactly sure like what the average number of hours is, but I don't think it's like far more than a traditional like software engineering role.
Yeah, I think that there is a stigma with fintech that people work super long hours and it's very stressful. And I think that can be true at some companies. Um, I will say that, for example, with Jane Street, you know, people work 8 to 10 hour days, normal. Generally, we work trading hours, so people say like you should be in when the traders are in. But you know, if you come in a little late, no one's going to give you that hard of a slap on the wrist. And yeah, it's just, I would say it's a lot of the general SWE, plan, develop, review, go to meetings with people one-on-one, you know, coordinate. Yeah.
Yeah, I think to add on top of that, I think the reason that a lot of people work longer hours is because uh, in the system, like your compensation is kind of scaled to how much impact you have at the company, and it scales a little bit faster than tech companies with the promo schedule. So I think some people work very long hours in order to kind of get a leg ahead when it comes to getting their annual or quarterly performance bonuses, which uh, later on in your tenure tend to take up like most of your compensation. And so I think that drives a lot of people to work hard. Um, but I don't think there's necessarily a culture where you have to work like 10 hours a day.
Yeah, no, I know that we kick out the interns if they stay too late. We're like, go home, go have a life.
That's really interesting. I guess like this is sort of related to the last question, but what are some common misconceptions of your field that you would like to dispel?
You don't need to be a math whiz to get into fintech. I am horrible at math, yet I'm still here.
Yeah, I think that's pretty true. Like, not that Alden's bad at math, but because I'm also like, you know, not like, you know, I didn't take like a math master's or PhD or anything. They definitely hire quantitative analysts and developers who have just taken undergraduate level math and maybe like just the math classes that they have to take with their CS classes. And when they test you, it's more often about your intuition than the specific things that you've learned in classes. Like they're not going to ask you to, I don't know, come up with like the closed form equation of some like weird distribution or something like that, or at least not that I've seen. So, but rather it's more like how like how much intuition do you have when it comes to solving these kind of math problems on the job?
Okay, so that was all the questions for the introduction portion of our interview. And our second part is getting into the field. So the first question, so how did you become interested in going to these fields? How would you pitch your role to someone who is interested?
Who wants to go? Raise your hand, Lucas.
Yeah, Lucas, you want to go? I see you.
Should I go? I don't have a great answer for this.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. Wait, no need to feel peer pressure. You don't
Yeah,
have
no.
to answer.
I mean, I can start. So how to become interested in going into fintech? I'd say that if you're interested in being a SWE, you should at least consider fintech, because as we've kind of said before, the general day-to-day and the base knowledge that you need going in isn't that different from what you'd normally have as a SWE. So I think that's the first thing, which is that you don't necessarily need to be super interested in the stock market or pay attention to how things are doing. And then for anything specific, so for example, I like cybersecurity just because I like the sorts of problems that it entails with potentially malicious actors, that you might have like another human on the other side. And by being into that, by poking around, asking if I could work on the team, and just get further into it was kind of how I got into it. So that's a little bit of a ramble. But yeah, I'd say, how do you get interested? Just find something that you enjoy doing. And then most of these fintechs will need someone doing that.
Yeah, I think my pitch is kind of a compare and contrast when it comes to fintech and like software engineering companies. I think there are a lot of problems in software engineering that can be abstracted and vendored out to many different companies at once. So most companies are going to do something like a CRUD app where they create, remove, update, and delete. And wait, create. I forgot what the R was. But yeah, like there's a lot of existing solutions out for those kind of things. And if they're catering to your typical customer, then they don't have any particular performance requirements. So all of that could be done by an external provider like AWS, and and so that makes the typical developer's job a little bit simpler. Meanwhile, also removing boilerplate. However, I think for fintech, it's like a very special avenue where a lot of performance and a lot of like delving deep into the problem is required, and kind of really requires you to design and come up with novel solutions to handle this particular kind of data set and problem. And I think your when you contribute to, for example, improving the performance of a trading system, the rewards are immediate, and you can kind of easily quantify how much you impact the company. Meanwhile, if you are like a data scientist, you have to run A/B tests and things like that in order to see the kind of real potential impact that you have. And those are technically like, not as obvious as a single P&L number at the end of the day, which is like how much money have you made the company. So the difference is much clearer when it comes to working at a finance company for what your impact is as well.
Yeah, I think rather than pitching the role, I just want to talk about like how exactly like I got into like the role. So like last year, I don't think I even heard about Citadel, especially since at UCLA, like you don't really see financial companies recruiting here. So it was actually like a former UP officer, like How You, who like interned at Citadel, and like How You and I like did like similar thing. We were both like competing on the ICPC team at UCLA. So he referred me, and that's basically like how I got like an interview basically at Citadel. So I think just like if you have like an interest in like software engineering, as well as I don't know, just like perhaps like more mathematical things, then applying for these roles is like you know, a good idea. Gives you more options.
Yeah,
Yeah, I just want.
oh,
Oh,
I,
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say my answer isn't going to be as deep as Ray's, but I think what made me interested in it was that I was always kind of like, oh, I wonder how the stock market works. Like it's super complex, but it's actually kind of interesting. And then that's what made me want to like apply and recruit for these companies. And I ended up getting I ended up getting 2 Sigma through the Grace Hopper conference, which if there are any female Swedes out there, they should check out. But I will say like what made me want to actually go to the company was the fact that my interviewers were really nice to me, and I felt like the culture there I could really resound with. I think 2 Sigma has a reputation for having nice geeks. It's kind of like their tagline, and I will say that I feel like that culture really resounds with me, and I really enjoyed being able to work with people that were really smart, but also really willing to help me learn.
Cool. The next question is it more difficult to get into a role as opposed to traditional software engineering? And how was the recruiting process different?
Harder questions. That's what I'd say. At least in my personal experience, the fintech questions were more difficult than, say, Big Four questions. But besides that, it was the same general, phone screen. Back then it was on sites. Now it's non-sites, or whatever companies do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I actually got a figure from Citadel like when I was interning that they had so basically their acceptance rate was like 0.05% of all of the applicants that applied, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. It's because they only have like a handful of people that intern in the summer every year, and most of them are like all, maybe most of them, maybe all are in Chicago, and it's like a group of like 20 to 30 people, and that was how much it was when I was interning at least, and I think the appeal that these finance companies have is that they have a very strong brand when it comes to like Ivy League schools and like schools in the East Coast like MIT. And so a lot of people from those schools then tend to work there, which then kind of artificially raises the bar for like programming question interviews. At least that's my theory.
Yeah, I actually think the Citadel like, you know, internship class got bigger. Like I think this year was like 200.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And it,
But I think there was, you know, still a lot of applicants. So it's definitely like not trivial to get in. I think the interviews were, you know, like comparable. Like they're probably around like a similar level to like tech company interviews. Maybe maybe a little harder. I'm not like too experienced in terms of um, being able to compare those. But it is definitely like not easy to to get into like a full-time role or internship role.
Yeah, I think the like the tech like the CS interview questions aren't super difficult when it comes to like algorithms, but they do test you on some things that you wouldn't typically get tested on. Like for example, how well do you know C++ for like a very C++ centric trading company? Um, or like, do you have a little bit of probability background? They'll probably give you some like brain teaser quiz on that. And I don't think companies um, like the big four would ask questions like that because it obviously adds noise uh, to the interviewing process, and they don't particularly need you to know how to like how probability stuff works.
I think Ray said it earlier, but they kind of want to see like your intuition. So I think one of the things is like a big part of it is how you think that they really want to get into. So, I mean, for us, the intern class was 30 people as well. So, you know, filtering out for those people that they really think in a similar way. I think that's part of why those sorts of questions come up.
Nikki, do you have anything to add? If not, that's totally cool.
No, I think they said it all.
Cool. So moving on, if someone wanted to get into your position, what extracurricular activities or personal projects or classes do you think they could do that would position them well?
So I guess I don't, or I feel like I can't really, like, I guess like my word is not definite because like I've only really gone through the recruitment process once. But I think something that uh, something that I think they value a lot is like your GPA. Like I think that if you study well and if you like get good grades, like they tend to value that more. And I feel um, like I think I was recruiting with like alongside my friend, and I think in terms of our like resumes and our like portfolios, I think one major difference was like GPA, and I think like that's kind of what pushed that over there. And then I guess I would say just showing that you have a passion for things that you, or it's showing that you have a passion for and are willing to pursue things that you like, I guess.
Yeah, actually, I think I'm not sure if Lucas has experienced this, but Citadel asked me for my SAT scores.
Yeah, they always do that as like the final step in like in the process. They always ask for your like GPA and other like statistics. I don't think it's an important part. I think it's just like they want to check for like red flags. If your SAT was like extremely low or something, then maybe they have some reason to like not give you an offer. Um, yeah, so I think it does matter when they like initially filter out people. I think when they look at resumes, they definitely, you know, will look at your GPA, maybe as like the first thing they look for. Um,
I I don't think it's um, too I don't think it's too common though throughout the finance industry. I think Citadel is just an edge case of this where they emphasize so much on GPA.
Yeah, I think it's like different experiences. Like, I think, or like, I believe that like me, like being really dedicated to learning and like being really studious helps. Like, I guess, like also in terms of like helping with my interviews too. But I guess like different people have different experiences. I'm kind of interested to hear what you have to say, Ray, though, because you've like recruited at like so many different companies. Like, I wonder like what your perspective is on like what you think makes them makes you attractive to them.
I think the fact that okay, actually, let me think about this. So I think the fact that I worked a lot with C++, and I contributed to a couple of open source repositories, and kind of have a log of like C++ related things on my blog really convinced them when it came to first viewing my resume. I don't think this is a must for sure. I think actually one thing that I found that seems to happen very often is that they actually look to see if you're a TA or a tutoring like person at your previous university, because oddly enough, me and Alden were both tutoring committee from UPE,
And so is Nikki.
Yeah, and so is Nikki, and I think when I look at the other people who have joined these places, they were all like TAs or like tutoring for some like operating systems class or like statistics. One of my friends is like the Waterloo Data Science Club president. So I think they look to see if you're truly passionate about your studies, that you might even put it as your extracurricular, and you would tutor people outside of your time, I guess.
Yeah, I personally take a lot of these things and put it under like stamps of approval in the sense where, you know, GPA, that's a very quick thing to just look and it's like, okay, you know, if they have a high GPA, it's easy to filter by that. Same with like maybe tutoring or extracurriculars, being interested in something. To some extent, also past work experience. Like mileage may vary, I think, on all of these, especially also per company. But anything that you can do to very easily say, like, yes, I am interested, I am passionate about what I do, is very good for getting that first interview, which I think is a very difficult step. Because after that, you can demonstrate, you know, oh, you want to work with me because this is how I think, and you know, I'm getting correct answers.
Okay, so moving on to the third part of our interview, which is about career progression. I suppose the first question is, what does the career progression look like for your role?
I think Alden is probably most equipped to answer this because he's been working.
Oh no!
Already.
Oh no! So I think the biggest thing. So I mean, like Nikki, you can talk about 2 Sigma maybe, and Perrine, Lucas, you can talk about Citadel. But one thing is that there's for example, at big tech companies like Google and Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon, you have your levels, right? You like come in as an L3, then like maybe after a year and a half, you're supposed to be an L4, then like L5. In my experience, there aren't those distinct levels, right? You can't go look up and see, okay, you know, that someone's at X level or Y level. It's more about what responsibility you take on. And this responsibility can be in terms of systems you own, or people that, you know, report to you, or just like the amount of things that you touch and like are involved in. So in a sense, career progression is getting a higher level view of whatever aspect it is that you're working at. So for example, with the SWE progression, right? If you just want to be a tech lead, you start out coding, and then you add in some design, and then you add in like finding projects that you can design, and then you look for problems that are going to need projects. So it's going up levels to get higher and higher views. And as you naturally do that, you're going to get involved with more things.
So I can offer a contradiction to that statement
Ooh.
at 2 Sigma. There actually is a level system there,
Okay.
and there are, it's like a year and a half in between the first and second level. I'm not sure like past that, but I know there's also a 2 different tracks you can go as a SWE. You can continue to be like a SWE, but like an advanced SWE, and then there's also like a management track. So it's kind of like 2 different ways people can approach things. And I'm not sure if this maybe has to do with the size of 2 Sigma. We have like a little less than 2K people, but I'm not sure if size factors into that for Jane Street or the other firms.
I mean, Jane Street is like a little over 1,000.
Okay.
It's less than 1,500, I think. I think that because that sounds a lot like what like normal tech companies would do. That's a lot more structured, which can be very beneficial. I think this may be unique to Jane Street, just being like, oh, we don't want to do the whole level thing. I don't know if Lucas or Ray, you guys have anything about the Citadel, or if Ray, anything about HRT.
I don't think there are like explicit levels. Like, I'm not too sure about career progression, especially since I only intern. But I know like it's not necessarily like like your title, but it's more like your responsibility. Like if you're like managing people under you, then like you still might have a title of like software engineer. But like since you're like managing people, then like obviously you have more responsibility, and like in that sense you have like or like you're like on a higher level than just like a software engineer that doesn't manage anyone.
Yeah, I think Lucas described it pretty well. I think there are levels in Citadel, but they're not like there aren't that many. So for example, I know that there's a senior engineer and there's a like software engineer. I don't know if there's a staff level. And I know on the quant side, you start off as a quantitative research analyst, and then you get promoted to a quantitative researcher, which sound the same. And then I think there are like other tiers that go beyond that, and you eventually become a portfolio manager, which then like you kind of manage your own pool of money, I guess. And I think when it comes to the software side, though, the tiers are not super important in Citadel. Just like Lucas said, it just depends on how many things you own in the company. And I think for Hudson River, it's because the scale is like much smaller than the other 3 companies, in that it only has about 150 engineers and quants combined. That there isn't really a leveling system past like your title and then like the lead of that entire group. And there are 3 leads, one for algorithm developers, one for algorithm engineers, and one for core developers. So there's just like 3 people that are leading these 3 different groups, and then they report to the partners, which are kind of like, in a traditional sense, kind of like the CEOs of the company, like they call the shots. But under them, everyone is just called an algorithm engineer, algorithm developer, or core developer.
Okay, so we've talked about sort of like vertical movement. So let's talk about lateral movement now. So what are some similar roles you can see yourself moving into in the future?
So I guess it's kind of too early for me to say because I am still in school, but I will say that I am planning to return to 2 Sigma for an internship and then getting my master's. And then beyond that, I wouldn't know. But I guess like from my experience interning there, I really enjoyed doing it. So I don't see myself like leaving like really quickly or anything like that.
Yeah, I would say lateral movement within the company. So I'm in cybersecurity, and likely I will stay there because I like cyber. But if I suppose, 2 years down the line, wanted something different, I could move to being a SWE on, say, trading systems. So equivalent of like algorithm engineer, I think, would be at HRT, something like that. Or I could leave the company. I could become a SWE at some level at Big Four or something like that. I think that you're not really restricting yourself by going into fintech.
I think there might actually be some kind of a handicap when it comes to lateral movement out of the company because of your non-compete clauses. When you work at a finance company, they try their best to keep their secrets. So you're not legally allowed to work for a competitor for some period of time. The good thing is that they'll pay you some amount of money for doing nothing during that time. But the downside is that you can't work at any competitors, which may be something that you want to do. But within the company, I think lateral movement, there's like one very common lateral movement that a lot of people want to do, and that is from software engineering to quantitative researcher. And I think this totally depends on the firm. Some firms allow this kind of transition to happen the more and more you become like accustomed to the trading system and the research frameworks. But some other ones have a clear divide between them. I know at Citadel, the transition it happens, and it's not, and people do that. I'm not sure if it's very supported though. I think for HRT, people kind of just like you can do quant work as an algorithm engineer, and like you're basically treated as a quant. But I don't know if there's some kind of like title change that could happen. But I guess that is like might be an edge case because the company is smaller, so then the roles are more fluid. But yeah, what about you guys?
Well, for example, after having like an internship, do you feel that you could do an internship at another company, either fintech or not?
I guess I could say that or like I can see myself doing that, but since I enjoyed oh no, I'm blurry. Since I enjoyed my experience so much, I wanted to go back. I guess I didn't really address lateral movement within the company when I answered the question. I would say that I like currently don't even know like what I enjoy doing within a company yet. So I think that like that may be possible. Like I may end up like joining a team and then switching teams like maybe a year in. And I will say that like it's pretty, I don't think it's like it's not like rare, like a lot of people do it and it's not impossible to do. So I would say that like if you are considering, or like you don't have to feel tied down in the team that you're assigned to, or I guess like I would say that specifically for 2 Sigma, I'm not sure how it's like that at other companies.
Plus one that, yeah, pretty much if they will, once they have you, they'll probably try and find a good spot for you. And I think this applies to broader tech as well, but in fintech specifically, yes, I think that they'll say, okay, you're not necessarily happy on this team. Let's try and find a place that you'll work well.
Yeah, I don't know too much about movement within Citadel or like any like financial firm, but in terms of like lateral movement from like finance to tech, I do think it's easier than going the opposite way. Again, I don't have like experience like doing that exactly, but I think the like skills that you need for software engineering role at tech is like a rough subset of skills that you might need for like fintech roles.
Cool. That's actually all the questions we had for today. And I think we're like a little bit over 45 minutes. So if you guys have any like closing remarks or anything else you'd like to add about your role, now would be a good time to do so.
I guess I would just say, like, don't feel intimidated by applying. I think there's like a stigma of it being like really hard or like out of reach, but just because they don't come to UCLA doesn't mean you can't apply.
Yeah, I think what Nikki says is exactly what I wanted to say. Like, you know, now that there's some people working at these firms now, like I think having, like, if you want to apply to these places, if it seems interesting, then like the UCLA alumni are always here to help. And I think it only benefits the UCLA CS community if our students have more choices when they decide to intern in order to find like where they really want to work in their next few years of their life. So give it a try.
I want to add on to that. I think like the financial like presence at UCLA definitely has been like growing recently. Like for example, Citadel recently became like an affiliate with UCLA. So yeah, I think like you should you know, just because you don't really hear about these companies that often like doesn't mean you shouldn't like apply to them. I think they're like great options that you should consider along with, you know, traditional suite companies that you might apply to as well.
Yeah, for example, I got my internship and then ultimately my job just by an online form. You know, I didn't know anyone at Jane Street. I just applied, and well, here we are now. So, you know, you might as well just send in the interviews if you manage to meet someone who knows them. Who works there, or you meet a recruiter through an event. That's great. But if not, just get a list and start applying.
Cool. Thank you everyone for your insights today. I hope that our viewers have learned more about Quant and Fintech. And yeah, thanks for tuning in.